Welcome back to another PHP tutorial. In this program, we're going to create an entry form, a data entry form, and then print the results back to the user. So this will take a couple videos made to finish. So let's start by closing our previous project if you have one open, and then I'm going to start a new project. So let's go to New PHP Project, and I'm going to call this Form Demo. So form-demo, and I'm making sure that I'm in the MAMP htdocs folder. Click Finish. Our form demo, we're going to need to have a file to get started with. So we can just go with a pure HTML page. So let's go to New File, and I'm going to call this thing the form and call it HTML. Finish. Now, let's start off with our usual HTML tags to tell the computer that we're using HTML at the beginning. Let's do a header, and then finally the body. So inside the body, we're going to create something called a form. So a new tag, F-O-R-M, and then it automatically adds a close form. Inside the form, we can do things with text. So let's say I'm going to say this is my name, and then I'm going to create an input tag. So let's do an input, and then inside of input, we're going to add a few more things. So this is going to say type equals. So the type of input can be a number or it can be a word. In this case, it's going to be text. And let's see, this thing also needs a name. So I'm going to call this thing my name input. So you notice the text case I'm using is a lowercase, uppercase mix. That's called camel case. And then the last thing you need is what they call a submit button. So we're going to make a tag called button, and then the type is going to be equal submit. So a submit button goes with a form. I'll show you what that looks like now. So let's push the save key, Control S, and let's switch to our browser. So I'm going to go back to my folder called localhost, refresh the page, and look for form demo. And there is my form HTML file, and you can see that I have a name, I have an input, and then a button. Well, that button looks pretty small, so it needs some text. Inside the button, between the tags, let's give this thing an OK. Let's push save again, refresh the page, and you can see the OK button is now showing up. Let's see what other controls we can use. So I'm going to Google, typing in form controls HTML. Now a good site that is always a good reference is this website called W3 Schools. Let's see what they offer there. So they can show you different forms and what they do. So like here is the input text, and it'll show us a demo over here of what it looks like. So I'll close that. What else do we have? We have an input type of password. Let's see what that looks like. So a password gets you your username, and then when you type the password, all you get are those little dots. So there's lots of other things we can use. So we can use submit buttons, and there's an example of a submit button. There's a button called reset. So if you type something in and then you push the reset button, it switches back to the original values. So there's lots of things that you could use on your form, and that shows you on this page all the different types that are available. So I'm going to put a few of those examples here on my page. So I'm going to create a data entry form for a hero, let's call it. So let's give a couple of things here. So I want to capture his email address. Let's give him a hobby. I'm going to use another type of input this time. Instead of using text, I'm going to say number. Let's call this thing our age input. Alright, so we've done a few of those. Let's save the changes and test it out. I'm going to switch back to my page here where I was working with before and push the reset button, and you can see that I've got age is a little bit different. It's got a number clicker on it. The other ones are simply text inputs. Now they're all coming out in the same line. Let's go back and add another HTML tag called a BR. So BR is a line break, and it's the simplest way to start a new line, and it's not always the way that I choose, but it works. So let's try the reset, and you can see we have different inputs. There's a couple other types of inputs. Let's try birthday. And this input type is called a date. All right, there's a couple more inputs. I'm going to save those and see what they look like. So refresh this. So the date, in Chrome, it gives you this nice calendar pop-up window that lets you pick a date. Also, you can do a color selector. And so, let's see, it's not picking out the right colors here. There. Let's give this guy a password as well. Let's create one called IQ, and this one's going to be a slider variable, and that one is called a range. So let's check this out and see what happens. So I'm going to refresh the page and see the new controls. So the password, as you type, you can see that there's dots, and then the range is a slider option here, and then we can get a value from that and click OK. Okay, so now we've got some of the inputs there. Let's see what happens to them when we click the Submit button. Now, a form needs an action. So I'm going to say action equals, and then we need to point it to another web page. So let's call this thing process form PHP. And you notice I'm spelling this with a camel case again. So if I have an action on here, it's expecting that page to exist. Watch what happens when I click the Submit button. So I come back to my web page, push the Submit button, and I get an error that says, I can't find this file that you just told me about, processform.php. So we need to create that. So back into Eclipse, let's go and right-click on Form Demo and create a new file. And I call that thing processform.php. And finish. So now let's take a look at a new kind of variable that you haven't seen before. This is a PHP processing code, so I'm going to start right with the PHP coding. And I am going to do a statement called print R, which is a way to print an array of values. There's a special value or a special variable called the get variable. And what it does is it gets all the values from your previous form. Let's see what that does. I'm going to save the changes, switch back to my web page, and I'm going to put some values in here. So I'm going to put in my name, my hobby is computers, my age is 29, my birthday, let's see, pick something, let's go there. My favorite color, don't know why it doesn't always pick the right colors, but there it is. And my password, I'm going to put in 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. My IQ has to be higher, and then click OK. So now, oh, it wants to save my changes. No. So you can see that the get value has the names of each of the form inputs. So input name is Shad, email is my Sluter, hobby input is computers, age input is 29, and all the way down. So you can see that my IQ is actually 87. I thought it was higher than that. So now we can use these values in our program. So let's switch back here. Instead of printing that all the time, I'm going to select certain parts of it. So commenting out a line will make that inactive. But instead, I want to put in variables. So I'm going to capture things like the person's name. And that is a format in PHP for a variable, a $sign followed by any string. And then I'm going to use the get variable and tell it specifically which pair I'm looking for. So inside of square brackets and apostrophes, or quotation marks you call them, you put in the value of the form item. What was that form item? So that thing was called name input. So I'm just going to copy that name input, switch back to process form, and paste it into here. Now I can use that variable later. I can say echo, I can say hello, and then I'm going to put another quotation mark and a period. Period is the concatenator, which allows me to put in variables and strings together. And then I'm going to put another period and another string and say hello, person's name, welcome to my program. And then a semicolon at the end of every statement in PHP. So let's save that. Switch back, refresh the page. This time you can see, hello Shad, welcome to my program. Let's see if we can echo the other items. So we have the person's age, and that can come from the get variable called input age. And we can also give their IQ and all the rest of the variables. So the person IQ, and we're going to say get variable. And what was that form? So input was called IQ input. So I have to make sure I spell it with IQ and input and save the changes. Now if I wanted to print the other ones, I can do the same. I can say welcome to my program. And then I'm going to put in a couple of if statements. So I can, if I ask if the person age is greater than 50, then I can put in a response to that. So you can see I'm using the if statement, parentheses, open and close curly brackets. So if they're over than 50, they can say you get an age discount because you are more than 50 years old. And if they don't have that, I'm going to do an else statement, and this time I'm going to say echo you look young today. Your time is coming. Okay, so let's see what that does. If I push save and go back to my form, let's see, I put in 29, so I click OK, and it says you look young today, your time is coming. Let's go and switch the age to 51 and click OK. So you would expect if I put in 51 that I would get a different message. I click OK, and it still says I look young. So I did something wrong in my program. Let's go see why. So I used the person age from the input age format. Let's go and see if that was actually the form name. So it says input age. I reversed them, so that's age input. So it's a good example of messing up your variable names. Let's just paste in the new ones so I don't make a mistake. Save the changes and refresh the page, and this time it says you get an age discount because you're more than 50. Alright, so now let's go and add a few more things. I want to do the person's IQ. So let's see, I'm just going to echo the IQ and say your IQ is, and let's put in a period and type in person IQ. Let's save that change. And by the way, I would like to add a new line break to the end of these things. So before I close the end of the string, I'm going to put in a HTML tag, and then here I'm going to put in a HTML tag for BR. So every time I start a new line, it's going to be because of the BR command. So let's try this again. Click OK, and it says your IQ is 87. How high does that go? Let's slide up to the top and click again. And this time it says 100. Let's go back to the form. Inside of the input range, there are other attributes that you could add. So like you could say min equals 0 and the max equals, let's say, 200. And let's save that change. Refresh the page, and this time if I slide up to the top, put in my name, and click OK, it says my IQ is 200. Okay, so that's a pretty good demo of what we would use a lot in PHP. A couple of key learnings. HTML has the key name form. The action will point you to the next file. The input names have to be specifically stated, correctly spelled, otherwise you get the wrong results on the next page. So here's your homework. Let's take some of the other items. So that's your birthday and your color and your password, and let's echo those out to the screen like we did before. And let's try some if statements to say if their IQ is low, then give them an insulting message. Or if their color is blue, then we say I agree, blue's a great color. So try experimenting with the form processor and respond to the person's inputs.